Ag Bioscience, the #1 ag tech podcast globally, is now available on video. Hear from leaders and innovators across food, animal health, plant science, ag tech, and agriculture. Mondays at 6 a.m. on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. While you're there, subscribe and leave us a review. It's the Ag Bioscience Podcast with Agronovis Indiana. Get more information at agronovisindiana.com.
The internet changed how we work. AI is changing what work gets done. A bank cut loan processing from days to hours. A student built an AI scheduler, improving on-time delivery from under 70% to over 90%. Most teams know AI matters, but aren't sure where to start. InAI is Indiana's statewide AI adoption effort, built with industry, academia, and community partners, helping you move from understanding to action. Visit inaiready.com.
As here, Val Ackerman makes her way to the center of the court. A few blocks away from the forearm. And the first basket in WNBA history is scored by Penny Toller out of Long Beach State.
The WNBA, 30 years later.
Mark almost got that fifth foul. Find inside. It's Boston.
I talked with two WNBA women pioneers who helped establish, develop, and grow the league to where it is today. On this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. And I'm really pleased to be joined on the podcast this week by Val Ackerman, founding president of the WNBA, currently the commissioner of the Big East Conference, and Kelly Krauskopf, the president of basketball and business operations for the Indiana Fever. And ladies, thanks for taking the time to join me on the podcast.
Great to be with you. Great to see Kelly as well.
Hey, Val, you're going to be in Indianapolis, I know, this weekend for a special award. The WNBA, of course, is celebrating 30 years in business this season, and the Indiana Fever will be honoring you with the Lynn Dunn Inspiring Women Award during an event at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. A great honor. Congratulations on that. What does that award mean to you?
It means a lot. It really does. I'm so honored by the outreach, by Kelly and Tracy Ellis Ward and Amber. I think all of you sort of hit me on this at one time or another. And of course, I have great respect for Lynn and for everything that she's done for women's basketball with the Fever and otherwise. And so I'm frankly, I'm just really excited to be there, to take in a game, to see the Sparks, frankly, a charter WNBA team who've been part of the foundation of the league and continue to be that. And so I'm just, I love coming to Indianapolis. I actually was there recently for an NCAA committee meeting. It's always great to be there.
Yeah. And Kelly, you and Val certainly go way back. In fact, you and Val worked side by side or have worked side by side since the beginning of the WNBA. You really began your career with Val. Talk about your relationship with her and how that has grown over the years.
Well, I joke with Val that, she got me into this deal. So here we are 30 years later. And I'm just, every once in a while, I think about the path and the journey. And it started with her thinking of me, calling me during the 96 Olympic Games and saying, hey, I'm putting my staff together in New York. I'd like to talk to you about director of basketball operations position. And the rest is history from there. So, and then the opportunity to come to Indiana and start a team. Yeah. The league was, growing at that time and the expansion of the WNBA led by Val. And there's nothing replaces the first year, right? This is, I think every year that goes by, you have a little bit more perspective of really how we sat in those boardrooms with David Stern, somebody that we all revere. And I marvel at like how quickly time went by, but how grateful I am and was for the opportunity to be a part of Val's staff and to be a part of those first years.
Yeah. What do you remember, Kelly, about that? I'm sure there was a lot of excitement around that, taking that leap of faith, I guess, in part to go to this new idea, this new league. What do you remember about that?
I was new to the NBA family. So Val was a part of the NBA family and staff. And so I knew that David Stern failure was not an option. We were going to succeed. And we're standing here today because of his legacy and because of really, his foresight and his assurance that this was all going to be put in place. The foundation was going to be built. But look, everything was, Val was, we talked about the rule book, right? What kind of rules are we going to utilize? The player distribution to teams, how we were going to sign players. I dealt a lot with the teams from an operational standpoint. So talking with NBA guys that were really kind of running those WNBA teams at the time, they didn't know a lot of the players. But, that the NBA is the best of sports at running teams, team franchise operations. So, yeah, there was a groundwork that had already been laid in that regard. But, understanding the women's game and what's going to be happening, I think was the next layer. And there's many stories that those of us that were there at the very beginning that we like to get around to and talk about. But it was just a thrilling time, to be honest.
Yeah. Val, as you think back 30 years ago to the vision, and if someone had shown you back then today's attendance, the television ratings, the momentum that the league is enjoying now, if someone had showed you that back then, would you have believed it?
Believe it or not, I would have, because
Okay.
that was the vision. When the league was sort of hatched, the vision was that it would become, our mantra was that it would become the fifth major league. We were sort of looking at the NBA and the NFL and Major League Baseball and the National Hockey League as the big four. And the vision was that someday women's professional basketball would be in that sort of tier on that level. And at the same time, we knew it wasn't going to happen overnight. The NBA wasn't built in a day, was founded in the late 40s. It really took decades for it to become the NBA as we know it today. And we were idealistic but realistic, I think is a way to put it, about how long it would take. And so for me to see that the generation that we expected would have to pass for all the good things to happen has now passed, and here all these good things are happening. It's it's fabulous, and it really has taken not just a village but a city. And I can't commend Kelly enough for what she and her team here in Indiana have done since the league welcomed the Fever with open arms back in 2000. It really has been an extraordinary journey and took a lot of people. And frankly, to Kelly's point, the benefit we had early was that the NBA was able to throw a lot of resources and specialists at the many components that, the league needed to have sort of mastered in order to get off the ground. But at the same time, we needed some full-time WNBA. And those people were part-time because they were still working on the NBA. And then we still needed the full-time staff. And I was thrilled when Kelly said yes and agreed to come to New York to be part of our, not large, but very capable, dedicated WNBA team back in 1996, 1997.
Looking back, as you think about decisions that were made, maybe in those early years or along the way, what were some of those decisions you feel have proved out to be important to the ultimate success of the league?
Well, maybe I'll start. I think the foundational decision was to play in the summer. And that had some people scratching their heads early on because they associate basketball with the wintertime. And yet we never considered that. I mean, the vision was that we would play in the summer when there was better television windows, most of all. Our teams, the NBA teams at the time, all of which, all of the WNBA teams that were associated with an NBA team had capacity because the NBA season was dark. We didn't have to compete against college basketball, which is formidable competition.
Yeah.
As you all know, in Indianapolis, what you're up against in the winter, as well as the NBA, you're up against the Pacers in the winter. So the summer, I think, was probably one of the biggest decisions, so that we could maximize exposure. And then the other one I would just cite is it was never in doubt that we would call it the WNBA. It was very much the intent to leverage the brother league.
Did some people want a different name? Did some want to go a different way?
No. Well, as Kelly knows, there was another women's pro league that sprouted at the same time we launched called the American Basketball League that had a very different vision, and they did play in the wintertime. they sort of gravitated to what they call the traditional basketball season. And for a variety of reasons, they didn't make it. They were out of business within a couple of years. But, we said, no, this is going to be WNBA or bust was the name. And I think that's worked to the benefit of both leagues.
Yeah. Kelly, in terms of the fever in building the franchise here in Indianapolis, what makes Indiana in your view, a great WNBA market? Of course, Indy and the state of Indiana are big basketball meccas, if you will. But what makes Indianapolis a good WNBA market?
Without stating the obvious, it's the basketball piece, obviously. When we wanted a franchise and Mr. Simon, raised their hand and said, add us to the list, the mandate then was you had to sell 5,000 season tickets to get a team. And, so there was a campaign and it was sort of like, if you want a team, Indiana, prove it. And we sold 5,500 season tickets just to be sure. And so there was a very quick galvanizing moment of like, this is the best place for a WNBA team. If you're going to put one in the middle of the country, in basketball country, this is the place to do it. And I think that's been proven. And then the other part is, what the Simon family has done for the city, for sports, the commitment to our franchise, to women's basketball, to women's sports in general. Everything about the model of success is really based on the backbone of your ownership and your support. And that really is what has been for us a separating piece, right? Is the ownership group, the resources that they've provided to us. And then along with that is the city. There's a lot of pride here. There's a lot of pride in the state. And so if we're going to have a basketball team, they're going to support it. We're going to be one of the best.
How important has the support of the Simon family been? And it continued, early on, but it continues today. I think about, you look in downtown Indianapolis and this amazing new training center that is going up now and really adding to the skyline as well. But the support of an owner has got to be critically important.
Yeah, it's everything. It really is. It's everything. And Val knows that from the early on as well. That's where you separate. And for us, we've always had the resources that we needed to run our team at a high level, to provide what we needed for our players. And now we're building, a 100,000 square foot training center just for our team, which is going to be the standard really in all of women's sports right here on our campus downtown. So that's just another testament to the kind of support that you need and frankly, that, you should have, right? If you're going to be that fourth major league, that's what you have to have for your athletes. And that shows you the commitment by the Simons and by our ownership group. So that's just demonstrates to the community, the city, the players, the league that, it doesn't matter the gender. This is an important part of the fabric of our community and of our city.
Val, as the league continues to enjoy unprecedented momentum, at the same time, you wake up this morning and the big story you're seeing a lot of talk about is Caitlin Clark. And fans and others who don't feel the league is doing enough to protect its biggest star. I'd be interested in your take because, again, it's everywhere and it's not reflecting well on the league. Your take on how the league is handling this situation and how important it is that they get it right ultimately.
It's I'm loath to pass judgment here and won't, but I will share that for any sports league, the performance of your officials is of paramount importance, and fans may not understand just how much time and energy goes into running a major league officiating program. And Kelly knows as well as anybody because that was part of her job when she was on our staff early on at the WNBA. There's no place in sports for hard fouls, for the possibility of injury to any player. And so any league really has to be very attentive to that, has to be probably, I would say, a mix of reactive and proactive. I think if you sense that sort of, things are moving in a certain direction, it's incumbent on the league to to sort of offer directives, to make sure there's adequate communication, that their expectations are made known to the players and the coaches and the officials alike. I mean, it's really, everybody's in on a safe playing environment for players. The people at Olympic Tower are smart folks. I know they care deeply about the integrity of competition, and certainly the image and the reputation of the WNBA is probably the most important thing that they and any sports operator has to worry about now. So I can't get into the details of this one. It was, this is not my area at this point. But I do have confidence that the people at the league understand what they need to do, and hopefully these sorts of things won't happen in the future.
Yeah. Do you think, though, Val, do you think because this latest incident is kind of the latest in what has been a series of situations around Caitlin, does the league risk losing this tremendous, some of this tremendous momentum if they don't handle this in the right way?
I don't know. I can't speak to that. Again, I don't know how clear I can make it that I really don't think it's my place. But I can say, as somebody who, in the Big East, we have our own, officiating program that we manage. And I would say over the 13 years that I've had this position, the topic that I have gotten the most emails about is officiating. Just straight through. It's a through line through every season, because that's what somebody's not going to be happy after a call, either because it didn't get called or because it did get called and they didn't like the way you called it. So all I can say to fans is it's a really hard area. The refs don't always get them right. They sometimes miss things. I just have to defend them a little bit because I know they're well trained and, these jobs are very difficult. But I do agree with you that at some point you have to make sure that fans know that the calls are mostly right. And hopefully at the end of the day, for me, my hope always is that there's nothing that adversely affects the outcome of a game.
Mhm.
That's, the toughest situation to deal with when you're running an officiating program. But again, I just, there's no place in basketball, men or women, for hard fouls. And I do hope that that topic can get under control.
Yeah. Kelly, as we're talking about Caitlin Clark and the Caitlin Clark phenomenon, if you will, there was an anticipation when she came to the Indiana Fever that this would be a big deal. Was the franchise really prepared for how big it became in terms of her impact on the franchise, on the city, and on the WNBA?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you're prepared for what is coming. You saw a fan base behind her. Yeah, those are all, opportunities, and it's a lift that the entire league has seen, and I think there's great learnings in every single day that with this new lift in fandom and viewership and interested partners, that there's always new opportunities ahead. So I think we had the backing and the resources, of our entire company. And so that there's probably not a better place to be prepared. I think Indiana, was very familiar being in the Big Ten and seeing Iowa being our neighbor state and seeing what was coming over, and it's been exciting from day one. And we are proud to go forward every day with her as one of the leaders in the league and certainly a face of the franchise. And it's been a thrilling new day, and there's new opportunities I can't say enough for what Caitlin's done for the game, for the league, for our team, for the city. Those are all moments in time that, are historical because there's a whole new generation of fans that are now following the WNBA.
And when you talk about the fan base of the Fever, her impact, obviously, in terms of attendance and the crowds, the size of the crowds, but in terms of fans that extend far beyond Indianapolis, right?
Yes, I mean, we have, I think, something like over 40% of people in the building are from outside of the state of Indiana.
Wow.
It's incredible. The people that I met a young family yesterday that drove from Fort Collins, Colorado, with her two daughters. We chatted for a minute. They showed me the signs they made. It's just people from Maine, people from New Hampshire. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And that's really what you want. That's the vision that, you hoped 30 years ago when we were sitting in New York, like, what would this look like? And you have the opportunity to have a fan base that's going to drive, like you see on the men's side. It's a bucket list. I think Indianapolis has sort of become a bucket list for a lot of fans that want to come to Indy, see a Fever game, see Caitlin Clark in person. And that's, those are moments that you don't take for granted.
As a bank, PNC prides itself on being boring. But the truth is they couldn't be more excited to serve the dynamic Indianapolis community. For nearly 160 years, they've quietly toiled away to deliver brilliant results for their equally brilliant clients. They have dedicated PNC teams throughout the local area all ready to do the boring work to help you unlock your own brilliance. PNC Bank, brilliantly boring since 1865. PNC Bank, National Association member FDIC.
We build Indiana. The Laborers International Union of North America are men and women building roads and bridges to get Hoosiers where they're going today and a new energy infrastructure that will keep Indiana competitive tomorrow. LIUNA's over 12,000 statewide members also grow local economies, earning good union wages, shopping where they live and work, and paying taxes. We build Indiana for good jobs and stronger communities. The Laborers International Union of North America. We are LIUNA.
Shifting gears to the college game, and Val, you have certainly a front row seat for this dramatic change in college athletics as commissioner of the Big East Conference. I would assume being a commissioner these last few years have been challenging and interesting. What's your take on the changing landscape of collegiate athletics?
I think some elements of it were inevitable. But as I've tried to explain to people, for a long time, there was a model that made sense and most people were satisfied with in terms of the relationship between athletes and their schools. And that was, if you went to a school, you were a top athlete, you could play the sport that you love, get admitted, maybe, when you might otherwise not have had the academic grade to get admitted. And importantly, you got a free education out of it. And you could graduate with a degree that was tax-free and ultimately debt-free when you got out. And that was the quid pro quo that seemed to work for a long time. What happened over time was that, in particular, certain sports at certain schools, principally in the sport of football, started to bring in so much money that the athletes, not surprisingly and deservedly, were looking around saying, hey, wait a minute. All this money is in this system, and somehow for me, a free education doesn't seem enough anymore, particularly when they were looking what coaches were earning and what schools were funneling into facilities, for example, because they weren't able to compensate the players beyond the full scholarships. So that's, resulted in litigation and a whole litany of developments over the last 5 or 6 years. And so now here we are in a place where the athletes can be compensated, which I have supported, but where the NCAA has increasingly found itself in a very vulnerable position legally. Because what's started to happen is athletes are now challenging anything that smacks of a restriction in modern terms on their ability to earn income. So now we see challenges to eligibility, athletes saying, hey, 4 years isn't enough. How come I can't play 5 or 6 years?
Yeah.
We're seeing pro players who on the men's side perhaps went early entry, now want to come back to college because of the earning possibilities they have versus, say, the G League. And so it's really created, frankly, a great deal of uncertainty and no small amount of chaos. Mm-hmm. And so the challenge right now for our schools, our coaches, is to navigate this sort of rapidly still evolving landscape in a way that allows our schools to fulfill their competitive aspirations and represent their schools with dignity because of what they do on the fields of play, but also to try to preserve what makes college sports unique, and that is the tethering to education. Because at the end of the day, these kids are students. Only a fraction of them are going to go on and play their sport or any sport after their collegiate days are over. And so I think that's really what a lot of people talk about is how can we adapt to this changing environment, but at the same time, make sure that we can hold on to what makes college sports so popular and so special and allow it to stay this form of engagement between the alums and their schools and the schools and their communities and so on. So it's really, I can't say there's no shortage of challenges here, but hopefully we'll get to a point where the legal chaos will settle down and college sports will be in the place it needs to be.
Yeah, Val, in your view, has NIL or what NIL has become, is it good for women's basketball? Is it good for women's sports?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen many, many success stories, especially in women's basketball at the collegiate level, where particularly the high profile athletes at the schools that are, for example, nationally competitive on television, where the athletes may have significant social media followings, they're doing very well in this environment. And in our league, I point to the UConn players most of all. In fact, I was noting to somebody the other day as an example, Paige Beckers came into UConn several years ago as a freshman. I believe at that time she was an early adopter of social media, had something like 500,000 Instagram followers coming in. Someone told me the other day she's now at 3.1 million followers. And I'm guessing Caitlin is, I don't know what her social media activity is, but assuming she has it, I'd be shocked if it wasn't at that level. And that's, it's frankly, that sort of thing is monetizable. That's a value to a company who wants to use the athlete in an endorsement kind of a way. So we're definitely seeing that in women's basketball. We're seeing it in a host of other sports. And so, yeah, I think it's definitely been a positive development across the board. And I think the athletes in turn are getting more sophisticated. And back when they come into the WNBA now, having had those business opportunities in college, my guess, Kelly, is that they probably come in more sophisticated. There's no early entry, as far as I know, still in the WNBA. So you've got a mature young woman who's got some chops here. And I think that probably makes them a better player in some ways. They're a better teammate, and it certainly sets them up in all the right ways for when their playing days are over.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask Kelly you about that exact thing. Has the players coming into the league now, do you see a difference?
From that standpoint, absolutely. I mean, I think they're coming in with branding partners and campaigns that are around who they are as young women off the court. So in many ways, you're getting a female athlete that almost is a household name because if she came from a high profile college program. So, there's benefits to when spending 3, 4, 5 years in a college program where you've got those types of partnerships, and now you come into the league, and most of your women's basketball fans already know who they are because there's been, this opportunity to storytell and create content around who these players are and who these women are as women off the court. So by the time they get to the W, you have a sense for who they are, and it's been very helpful and very beneficial. And then, we're not asking them to do things that they're not already used to doing. There was a day where you talk about, meeting with sponsors and talking with partners, and it was just a new world. It just wasn't something that was part of the everyday life of a female athlete because corporate America, frankly, was not that interested.
Mm-hmm.
But they're interested now.
Yeah.
And it's been a benefit to everyone. And it's time for these women to have those opportunities. They should have. That's what we tried so hard for 15, 20 years is creating opportunities and avenues for these women to be household names and to cut across Main Street, essentially, in our sports landscape.
Yeah. Let's look to the future now, if we could. And Kelly, as you look at the future of the Indiana Fever franchise, truly a tipping point, I would say, maybe as you look at the momentum here in Indianapolis, everything going on around the team, not only Caitlin Clark, but a great nucleus around her as well. The new training center downtown. There's just a lot going on. What's next, in your view, the biggest opportunity that you see for the Indiana Fever as a franchise going forward?
You hit on a few of them. You have a nucleus of young players the time is now. The time to really take steps forward as a basketball team is now because, anytime you get a group of players that have the kind of talent level that we have, you have to go all in. So timing is everything in sports leagues and for teams. Everybody has their cycles, and the Fever went through a down cycle, and now we're back on an up cycle, and so it's lots of opportunity out there. A lot of new fans, a lot of new business partners, branding opportunities, expanding outside of Indianapolis. In today's world, you're not really fenced in, if you will, by just your market. Because of social media, because of being able to storytell outside of that, you can really take your brand globally. We're already seeing that as well. So there's a lot of exciting things on the horizon. And again, this is next generation, next iteration of the Indiana Fever.
Yeah. Val, as you look at the WNBA and opportunities for the league, is it expansion? What do you see as the real opportunities going forward for the league, for the WNBA as they cross the 30-year mark?
I think it has most of all to do with just increased fan support, um, whether that's in arena, whether it's on television, whether it's reflected in consumer habits like purchasing merchandise. And to Kelly's point, the strengthening of the relationship between the corporate community, local and national, with these athletes and with these teams. I think it's just a build. And I think maybe, it may be possible. It may well be possible for there to be comparable results between the NBA and the WNBA someday. I mean, we've seen that in tennis. And for us early on, that at least for me, was always the holy grail, because men's and women's tennis seemed like they were on an equal plane. The salaries were comparable, thanks to the work of Billie Jean King and others fighting the fight over many years. The games and the tournaments were run, the Grand Slams anyway, together, in a way that sort of nobody was sort of better than the other. They were comparable in that way. And so I do think as the WNBA expands, adds teams, grows the schedule, as salaries continue to grow. And why will they grow? Because of fan support. Mm-hmm. Fan support that can be monetized is how players benefit. And so I do think at this point, the league's very much turned a corner. Whatever uncertainties there may have been when we were getting it going, or in some of those later years, Kelly, where, maybe it wasn't quite where people wanted it to be. I think those questions have been asked and answered now, is my read. And so for me, that's, it's the dream come true. And sort of adding to it now, it's not just women's basketball, although I continue to think women's basketball leads the way. But now you've got women's soccer doing it. You've got women's volleyball with multiple leagues vying to be the one. You've got softball moving. You've got women's professional ice hockey now turning heads. And so it's just sort of all happening together in this very exciting and frankly glorious kind of way. And so the rising tide is really lifting everybody up. But again, what sort of makes my heart swell is that it seems like women's basketball is once again leading the way. And so that's the WNBA. And it's thanks to the incredible leadership of Mr. Simon and Kelly and Mel and everybody on the team at Pacer Sports and Entertainment, because it really does it's a group effort of the highest order. And as long as you've got people like that manning the oars and doing what needs to be done and adapting to the landscape, I think the future of the league's in very good hands.
Final question for each of you, and more of a reflective question, I guess. When you look back, what gives you the greatest pride, and not in your necessarily careers, but what has happened or what you have contributed in significant ways in what women's basketball has become? What is most prideful to you about what women's basketball has become? Val, I'll start with you.
Well, I think for me, this last collective bargaining agreement was a wow for me. I mean, I have pretty vivid memories of the shoestring budget that we were on early on, and I think I was part of the first two collective bargaining agreements with the players. When Pam Wheeler was running the union, and Sonia Henning and others were the part of the athlete leadership. And it was very modest, what we could do, what the NBA was prepared to do, what the economics would allow for. And so to see the delta between that and what's happened now, for me it's a wow. It's a wow for me. So I take a lot of pride in that. But I think if you're asking for moments, I have so many, memories of the first games. And even before that, the gold medal game in the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta, when Team USA, on whose back the WNBA was built in many ways, brought home the gold in front of 35,000 people at the Georgia Dome in 1996 in an extremely well-played game against Brazil. I'll never forget that game. And that was kind of really, in some ways, it brought it home, what the best players could do in ways that were so exciting. So, there's a lot of moments like that, but I do think just to see the television, the expansion, the outcomes of collective bargaining as a package, I think are hitting home for me.
Yeah. Kelly, how about you in terms of what women's basketball has become?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's seeing players become coaches, players become front office people. It's generational change and paying it forward for the next generation. I'm proud to see that we have 3 former players, 1 that was a coach and 2 that were players from our 2012, championship team on our staff right now. That's the kind of opportunities that I love about this league, and I love about what's happened in the space in women's basketball, is to see players move into those areas and keep pushing forward and driving, the game ahead. And then the generations of fans. Little boys telling me that they grew up watching Toli Bevilacqua and they have her wristband at home, and now this is a 35-year-old telling me this story or something. But seeing that shift, this is what we dreamed of. This is what we dreamed of, was for storytelling of young kids who are grown up today, that have grown up with us and have seen and have lived it with us, and now have their children come into games. That's what we wanted.
And much more to come, to be sure. Kelly Krauskopf and Val Ackerman, really appreciate you both taking the time to join me on the podcast. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Val, congratulations, not only on your award this weekend in Indianapolis, but on an amazing career and the impact that you've had on the game as well. And Kelly, hopefully I'll see you on the show here before long. We'll get you on and talk about the fever and the business of basketball.
That's great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on this episode of the Business and Beyond podcast, presented by PNC. We are a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. And you can download all of our episodes and get Indiana business news 24/7. All you have to do is go to InsideBusiness.com. I'm Gerry Dick. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.